A year in review.
I could not even understand how a child like that could travel over 1,000 miles from their home of origin, the country of origin, to the borders of Texas.
Arizona Week takes a look back at 2014 and some of the state's big news stories.
This is one of those social wave changes that is coming, and it's going to sweep across the nation.
From the Arizona Capitol, this is Arizona Week. Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Here's a look back at some of the big news headlines of 2014. What do you want government officials to know about people like you, those dreamers out there?
We just want to protect our families and keep all families together.
The Tucson sector alone is responsible for 60% of all the drug seizures in the entire country.
The bill is broadly worded and could result in unintended and negative consequences. After weighing all of the arguments, I have vetoed Senate Bill 1062.
We need to fund the people that we need to ensure that this never happens again in the state of Arizona. You're never going to eliminate child abuse. There's evil people out there. But we have got to be prepared and ready to go if there's a report that it is investigated and that child is protected.
Currently, there are over 16,000 children in Arizona that are out of their homes as a result of CPS involvement.
Now we've got the opportunity, if we all come together collectively, we will make sure that we will have the best Child Protective Service division in the country.
The biggest problem is going to be the lack of access. We were just let in and they showed us around, but we weren't allowed to interact with the children or talk to them in any way like that. And I kind of get that. With minors, it's always a touchy situation. But in the end, the big problem will be how do we get access to the information? And for us, is the real stories are going to be the children's stories. So how do we get in touch with the children and have them tell a story that's ethically responsible, that we're not putting them at risk?
I can say crisis is, I don't understand why the children, and just children, mind you, these are unaccompanied children from the age of 4 to 17. I could not even understand how a child like that could travel over 1,000 miles from their home of origin, the country of origin, to the borders of Texas.
Trying to find angles to this story. Why are the kids coming? Why are their parents in Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala? Are they here? Are they leaving because of the violence?
Well, now, if anything were to happen legally, I could be able to see Catherine in the hospital. She'd be able to see me. If we decide to adopt a child, which we are considering, we would both have rights over that child for, God forbid anything happen to either one of us.
I don't think that it's legal, unfortunately, and I am a passionate supporter of immigration reform. I think this is an unfortunate setback for the long-term agenda.
There have been countless studies and examples of how immigration has benefited this country dramatically, and yet we continue to see immigration in a very negative light.
Step one is to kickstart our economy. There's nothing like a growing economy to fix budget concerns. So the more job creation and growth we can have here in the state, the more tax revenues we create, the better it is to close that budget gap. So the first focus is going to be on the economy.
And to take a look back at the year, we're joined by Mary Jo Pitzel of the Arizona Republic and Howard Fisher of Capital Media Services. Thank you both for being here. Lot to get to. Let's go back all the way to January when we saw the debacle surrounding the Department of Economic Security and Child Protective Services. Howard, let's start with you, if you would kind of refresh us and where we are now.
Well, this started off actually before the beginning of this year really, with the idea that suddenly they found a couple of thousand cases where, oh, we just marked them as not for investigation. Trust us, we know what we're doing. Well, they went back and they found out that a lot of these really did require an investigation, that there were actual cases of abuse. They eventually removed children from the home. And what this finally did is convince lawmakers that if you're going to make protection of children a priority, you need money, you need staffers, because otherwise these things just get shunted off. And it finally gave people like Kate Brophy-McGee, who's been banging the drum on this for years, the ammunition she needed to go to the legislature and to say, with the support of Governor Brewer, give us the money and we will try to do the job better.
Now, the governor establishes her care team. She issues an executive order. A year later, Mary Jo, are we seeing any improvements in that department?
Well, what we have now is a new state agency that reports directly to the governor. That didn't happen before. It's called the Department of Child Safety. So it's setting up its own bureaucracy. You know, in terms of improvements, well, they got through all those 6,600 neglected cases that Howie mentioned, and found that there, some needed further investigation. A lot didn't, which might suggest that the prioritization system that the caseworkers were using, might have worked. Although you're not supposed to ignore any case, but they didn't find many that really needed a lot further work. And the new money is rolling in just this week. I went up and looked at a bunch of the laptops that are coming in. This will give caseworkers more flexibility and mobility. But in terms of numbers, there's going to be a report coming out soon that will show us how many children are in out-of-home care. I don't think those numbers are going to be encouraging, but it's always been cautioned that this is a big ship. It's going to take a long time to turn around.
And the other half of the equation is that the place where they didn't put a lot of money is the preventative services, things like subsidized child care, that if you don't want parents leaving their children at home or leaving the children in the car while they have to go shopping, you do need alternatives. Is that the role of the state? Now, that's the big philosophical discussion that occurs around here.
Now, the governor comes in and she says, we had a $3 billion deficit. I'm leaving. Now it's down to $1 billion. Some people may think that's great. Others may say it's still $1 billion.
Oh, well, I mean, $1 billion in a state budget that's already been slimmed down, if you would, during the Brewer era. And it doesn't even pass muster under Brewer's own benchmark, because she had said that she would leave the state with a structurally balanced budget. And being $1 billion in the red for the next year, and actually $500 million in the current budget year, doesn't meet that mark.
Well, and it goes deeper than that. The $3 billion, you remember, she dealt with in three ways. There was $1 billion worth of cuts, $1 billion worth of borrowing, and $1 billion worth of temporary tax cut. The temporary tax to solve that is gone. The borrowing, we've used some of the tools that we have, some of the budget maneuvers, the little blue smoke and mirror stuff to do that. And in terms of the $1 billion that's coming up, in terms of next fiscal year, we also have to remember that doesn't even include the $1 billion we may still owe schools, that we balanced the budget up to this point by keeping $1 billion away from schools for the last 4 years. So, it's not a much prettier picture than it was in January of 2009.
So what I think you're getting at is that a lot of the remedies that the state used the last time around aren't available this time. And also that fix last time included, I forget now, a bunch of money in federal stimulus dollars, which are not going to be happening because the federal government's got its own budget issues. So I hate this term, but the tools in the toolbox, are rather diminished. And I think we've got like a wrench and maybe a screwdriver somewhere in there that they're going to use to try to fix this situation.
And Doug Ducey's going to fix it by lowering the income taxes and leaving aside that if you look at the tax cuts that were already approved in 2012 that are now starting to kick in, we are going to be $226 million deeper than we otherwise would have been had the tax cuts not been enacted. And when you ask Doug Ducey, well, maybe is it time to delay, if not stop them, let's delay them to out years. Oh, no, we're going to keep doing this. So, the first rule, when you're in a hole, stop digging. I don't know what happened.
All right, we'll get to Doug Ducey in the budget. But first, before all that, we had SB 1062 that went through the legislature. Oh. And Mary Jo, you're already signed. That was religious freedom? Was it gay marriage? What was it?
It was just, it really depended on where you came from in terms of how it was viewed. Some people said this is religious freedom. Others said this is discrimination against homosexuals because it would have provided a legal defense. This legislation would have provided a legal defense for a business if they were to deny service to certain groups. And although there was a bill similar to this that got through the legislature last year, and was vetoed.
But for technical reasons, because the governor said, don't send me any bills till you send me the budget.
That's right. That's right. So, but this time it pops up and opponents were ready. And I think it caught everybody by surprise. There were big protests. The gay community rallied very quickly, and we had a lot of protests out here at the Capitol almost immediately.
But the funny thing about it is, with or without 1062, in Arizona, there is no civil rights protection for gays. You don't want to hire a gay? You don't have to. You want to fire somebody because they're gay? You can. You want to refuse service to them in a restaurant? You can. And so in a lot of ways...
So what was the point of the legislation?
The point of the legislation was in some ways anticipatory for what eventually did happen, which is gay marriage and whether that'll lead to discrimination. And I think it was also to provide some other shields for, you know, religious discrimination or anything else. But the fact is that as it relates to gay rights, which became the marches, which became the issues, Arizona has no protection. They're not a protected class under Arizona law. And only a few cities, like Tucson, have extended those protections.
But the big thing about 1062 is how it caught on fire. It became a national topic, you know, talked about on all the talk shows, brought a lot of attention, again, back to Arizona, and generally not in a positive light, you know, echoes of SB 1070. And we heard a lot of this during this fall's campaigns where people talked a lot about Arizona's image, how that affects business recruitment, how that affects the state's attractiveness to people who might even want to come and travel here. And, you know, we got back into an era of people saying, you know, I'm not gonna travel in Arizona if they don't like gays.
Yeah. And the other part of it is we know there is some version coming back. We're not sure what form it's going to take, but we know the Center for Arizona Policy is going to look for something to do. Partly, I think it's fundraising that as long as they think they're getting bills passed, they can meet their budget, but they are looking for anything they can do on issues of quote-unquote religious freedom, issues related to abortion, and we will be seeing those no matter what this session.
Another bill that maybe puts Arizona on the national landscape map again. Okay.
Right, and yeah, and what would Governor-elect Ducey do? He'll be governor at that point. What would he do about that? He was pressed about that a lot on the campaign trail. If there was a son of 1062 that came up, what he would do. He was non-committal, but seemed to be very aware of what that did to the kind of spotlight it brought to the state. But on the other hand, as Howie mentioned, the Center for Arizona Policy, their director, Kathy Herod, you know, was on his campaign and is part of what we believe is an informal kitchen cabinet. So, you know, she's got his ear.
Okay, let's move on. Summertime comes around. We have the influx of Central American women and children coming across the border. We see that they're temporarily stationed, if you will, in the Nogales area. Again, another story that really put the issue in the national spotlight. Here in Arizona, though, we see these children in this facility.
Well, the funny part was it really wasn't an Arizona story. They were coming across
in Texas. In
McAllen, Texas, that border segment. They were being shipped here for temporary housing and for processing simply because Texas got overwhelmed. Well, that, of course, fed into all the politics that goes with this, all the rhetoric, why we needed 1070. We had lawmakers saying, I'm going to stand at the border and I'm going to stop the buses. Never mind, they were actually being flown in by plane, so I'm not sure exactly what that was supposed to do. But again, it was the kind of publicity that Arizona didn't need, because if you're from another state and you're looking and you're saying, what is this hatred toward 8-year-olds coming in? And why is Arizona, again, at the forefront of that? And it's another bit of publicity that, as much as you might believe the current governor's position of the rule of law and sealing our borders, these are real people involved.
And that was something that I think really put this story in perspective, for regardless of what side of the debate you were on. Mary Jo, though, when we saw that the tens of thousands of children, and then it suddenly stopped, and now the number has trickled down significantly. Some of the children have been relocated either back to Central America or reunited with family members in the U.S.
I mean, the federal government was a little slow on the uptake here, and they got their act together, and they did a lot of publicity down in Central America, trying to raise awareness that do not try to come to the U.S. You're going to be returned, and I think that helped to stem the flood. And they also found lots of other locations throughout the U.S. to disperse these people, these immigrants, while they deal with their status. So it sort of went away as an issue, but it was interesting when it flared up, at least for some lawmakers who were in the early stages of campaigning, it shifted a lot of the discussion on the campaign trail to immigration, which some were happy to see, because Medicaid expansion was going to be a big issue in the Republican primary, since we had some Republicans who voted to expand that program, and they were attracting opponents who were running against that move. And it sort of obliterated that issue and put immigration up higher.
And this is a really important point, because the other thing that should have been a big issue in the campaign is the economy. We haven't recovered in Arizona. You know, we are still, the last jobless report had us at like 6.8% for November. We're still a full point higher than the United States. Construction lost jobs again. and where the discussion should have been on the economy, on what Fred Duval tried to do in terms of education, in terms of being the key to the economy, it all got shifted to this hot button item of immigration, and that helped change the outcome of the election.
Sure. Let's move on to the federal judge and his ruling for gay marriage in Arizona, bringing back the subject, as we talked about, SB 1062, now becoming more of putting it right back into the perspective here in Arizona. Gay marriage now illegal in Arizona?
I think Arizona was, what, the 32nd state to join the ranks of doing this, not through a vote of the people, but by a judicial order that rankled some people who felt that this needed to be a vote of the people, and Arizonans have voted in '06 against gay marriage. Although there is even Attorney General Tom Horn, who opposed the move, said that if that vote were put out to the public again today, he thinks it would pass. But yeah, it ignited a round of immediate ceremonies at courthouses across the state. And yet, for all the talk by certain groups that the world is going to come to an end if gays marry. Gays are marrying in 33, 34 states now. The world has not come to an end. Now, here's the shoe that hasn't dropped, though. There's at least one federal circuit court that has decided that states can keep gays from marrying. That's going to mean that at some point the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have to take up the issue. And given that the Supreme Court in its earlier rulings on the Defense of Marriage Act said states have certain rights to make decisions about marriage, in that case, because of the fact that the federal government was saying gays can't and the states were saying they can, it raises the possibility that the U.S. Supreme Court could say this is a state's issue, which could mean that the ballot measure that's since been abandoned in Arizona for 2016 will have to come back again for Arizona to make its own decision.
At some point. Now, Attorney General Tom Horn said he would not appeal. Did he make that decision because he wasn't coming back to a state office, or is he simply going with the will of the people in the state?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think he saw the inevitability of this. I think this is one of those social wave changes that is coming, and it's going to sweep across the nation and moving it backwards. It's like trying to go back to the 50s. I don't think we're going to see that.
And the other point he made is, look, let's even assume that we were to win here in front of the local judge. Goes to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is already on record in the Idaho and Nevada cases that states cannot keep them from marrying. He said, what's the point in spending time and money to go to a federal appellate court where we already know what the conclusion is?
All right, I mentioned Tom Horn, no longer the Attorney General, coming the start of this year. A new sweep, Republican sweep across the state. Doug Ducey, our governor-elect, as you mentioned, who will be governor very soon here. Former CEO of Cold Stone Creamery, former treasurer of Arizona, a numbers guy. Does he come in and change the entire dynamic of the state's budget?
I hate to say it, but there's nothing to change. I mean, let's look at it. At one point, when I started covering the state back in the 80s, we had a three-legged stool: property taxes, sales taxes, and income taxes. We've gotten rid of state property taxes. Now, Doug Ducey's talking about eliminating income taxes, which is going to make us depend on sales taxes. You can't do it. You can't get there from here. He had some great ideas that somehow if we take the income tax as close to zero as possible, we will grow the economy. We have cut taxes for the last dozen years. If it was going to work, it would work. And I think the moment he takes office on January 5th, he's going to get in there and suddenly say, well, this is a great idea, but you've got to deal with the reality on the ground. The reality is he's walking into a $500 million deficit for the balance of the fiscal year, the last 6 months. There's $1 billion coming next fiscal year, and that doesn't even count if the courts say that the state owes $1 billion to schools for what they didn't get over the past 4 years. I think he's going to have to just tread water on this.
Mary Jo, is he short-sighted coming into this picture?
Oh, I don't know if he's short-sighted. I mean, since he's been elected, he's been very quiet. He's appointed a lot of committees to advise him, but we're not hearing much out of him in terms of direction on where he will go with the budget, which is just driving people crazy. To your earlier question, is he going to radically change state government? Well, we'll know that he has realized he's in a deep hole if he comes out and announces some big blue ribbon panel that's going to study, state revenues or look at restructuring state government, which, happens about every 8 years. Somebody comes out with but that just delays things. At the end of the day, or at the end of the fiscal year, you've got to make the budget balance. And for the life of me, I haven't gotten any good indications on what those what those methods are going to be. I would not expect a tax cut, though, in the early years of a Ducey administration.
Okay, now we have Michelle Reagan, who may have surprised some people, beating Terry Goddard in the race there. She could, as we've seen in the past, maybe elevate from the position of Secretary of State to governor. A lot of people wondering, is she ready for the task, Howard?
Well, she thinks she is. You know, it's hard to say. She's had some time in the state legislature. She does understand the budget. Is anybody ready for governor? I mean, look, you've got Doug Ducey, who, 4 years as treasurer, which basically is an administrative task. You don't make a lot of decisions as treasurer. Is he ready to be governor? Was Fred Duval, whose main claim to fame was the Board of Regents and working for the Babbitt administration in the 80s, was he ready to be governor?
Well, was Jan Brewer, right?
Was Jan Brewer, yeah.
That's the more apt, example.
Exactly. She had been, to Jan's credit, she had 14 years in the legislature. She had time on the Board of Supervisors. She had been Secretary of State. And so when she, leaves at the end of this month, she'll have been in state government for 32 years. So she at least had some experience. I don't know that anybody's ready. I think that's why you hire qualified people. And that's going to be interesting to see, who does Doug Ducey surround himself with? Are these sycophants, or are these people who really have an understanding?
Yeah, and likewise for Michelle Reagan. I mean, she has a much smaller arc of influence in terms of who she can hire, but who does she turn to for advice? Because you really can't be Secretary of State in Arizona without keeping an eye on the possibility of going up to the 9th floor. It happens about once a decade.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to the Superintendent of Public Instruction race. The reason I bring that one up.
Surprise!
Pretty popular one there, but, to see a popular interest in that race after some of the controversy surrounding our current Superintendent of Public Instruction. So Diane Douglas, a Republican that was not widely favored, managed to come ahead in what we now know, Mary Jo, was a Republican sweep.
Yeah, she sort of squeaked out a victory. It took a little bit longer for them to get all those votes counted. I think it was like a 1 percentage point difference over Democrat David Garcia. What also marked this campaign is that Garcia was out there. He ran a very active campaign. Douglas didn't. She did one public debate because she had to, because she used public financing. And then she wouldn't talk to the media. So a lot of people look at that and say, her election, I mean, she looks at it and says, look, I won because I oppose the Common Core standards for Arizona school curriculum. But a lot of others say, no, she was just catching the wind from the Republican sweep. Now, since she's been elected, she has indicated that she's not going to go out and abolish Common Core right away. Well, she can't. It's not within the superintendent's purview, but she certainly can use her bully pulpit, but she has indicated that that would probably be a go slow approach.
Well, the other thing to remember is that you had a situation where Diane Douglas's campaign was, I want to listen to parents, I want to listen to teachers. I don't want to listen to, ivory towered academicians and bureaucrats and business people. And David Garcia came back and said, I'm endorsed by ivory tower academicians and business people. And he didn't get the level of frustration that people have in what was happening in the schools, and that parents do feel a lack of control, plus the Common Core issue. On a national level, I bet you there are 10% of the people listening tonight who can tell you exactly what is in a Common Core, what the goals are. But it's the idea somehow, this is Obama. No, it's not. Oh, this is the federal bureaucracy. No, it's the Governors Association, including Jan Brewer. But it's that fear, that feeling.
Okay.
In addition to Douglas, we also, Mark Brnovich beat Felicia Rodolini for Attorney General. I think that was also a bit of a surprise. Nobody had really heard of Brnovich. Rodolini had run 4 years earlier and had basically been running since she lost last time, had a strong campaign, but failed by about 5 points. And what's the interesting counterpoint to this is that when you look at the state legislature, the majority, the split between the Republicans and the Democrats remains exactly the same as it is now. So what does that say? Maybe that the district lines, you just don't have a lot of, the way the districts are drawn, there's just not a lot of variability there.
Before we end our program, Jan Brewer leaving office. What is her legacy? Mary Jo, why don't you start for us?
Nationally, I think she's always going to be remembered for 1070. People will recall her wagging her finger in the president's face. So nationally, that'll probably be the lingering image. Within the state, you know, it's hard to say. I think it's a mix. She's a mixed bag. I mean, she really has brought, she's done things to offend and delight people of all persuasions. And I must say that what she did for behavioral health, she settled a 32-year-old ongoing lawsuit over the state's treatment of the seriously mentally ill. She finally got it resolved. It will lead to it is leading to a change in how we care for people with mental health issues in Arizona. She also expanded Medicaid, which helped on the behavioral health front, but also opened up health care to a lot of moderate income and lower income Arizonans, and helps the state budget. So those are some of the big, pluses in her favor. I'll let Howie talk about a couple others.
Well, obviously, I think those are all important. Obviously, she believes that coming in with a $3 billion deficit, leaving maybe with $500 million or $1 billion is a big thing. But one of the things that she didn't get credit for is going up against her own party on things. One of them, of course, is Medicaid expansion, but the sales tax hike. If we had to cut another $1 billion out of the budget in 2010, where else would we have taken it? If we already took a bunch from education, some of it perhaps illegally. Nobody's cutting corrections. The universities, heck, they're down to just nickels and dimes in the state budget. So she does get credit for being a pragmatist and looking at things and saying, look, Medicaid brings in money and it provides care and it keeps the hospitals healthy, and we hike the sales tax temporarily to at least get us over the worst of it. So she has a reputation as a pragmatist.
Anything this year that really surprised the two of you? You've both been in the journalism business for years now. I mean, what was it this year that stuck out the most to you?
I think Diane Douglas's win, given that it was such a silent campaign and her opponent was so out there and had endorsements and support from a lot of Republicans.
I think 1062, because every year there's at the end of the session we say, where did something come from? There's always a bill that we don't know in January that's going to be an issue. 1062 in the debate, as Mary Jo pointed out, we had passed the same bill a year earlier and it wasn't on anyone's radar. This year it was
Very interesting. Lots to look forward to this next year. Thank you both for being here. Howard Fisher from Capital Media Services, Mary Jo Pitzel from the Arizona Republic. And thank you for joining us. That is our program for tonight. Arizona Week will go on a holiday break and return the week of January 5th, of course, when we have the governor's inauguration, followed by the State of the State the following week. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Brigado.